one rook, one knight, and the king has no escape. That is the Arabian Mate, one of the oldest and cleanest checkmate patterns in chess. Today, I've got 6 real game positions where the Arabian Mate decides a game. And in the final position, the mate does not look obvious at all until the rook and knight trap the king completely. Let's start with position 1. Position 1, it's black to play. White's king looks safe, but the back rank is weak and black's pieces are already pointing toward the king. And white has just made a blunder. Now black played knight f3, simply attacking the rook. At first, this looks like black is just attacking the rook, but the real point is much stronger. The knight controls the key escape squares around the king. And now white did the final blunder of the game and played rook takes g4. And that looks absolutely obvious because the rook was attacked. He simply moved it, captured the pawn, and the rook is also protected by the queen. So there should be no problem. But unfortunately, white missed queen h4. Brilliant idea where black is sacrificing his queen. And here, if white decides to take the queen on h4, then rook g1 simply lead to checkmate. So that is why he tried rook g2, defending on h2 as well because it was checkmate coming. But unfortunately, now nothing can save white from black's attack. And black played queen takes h2, again sacrificing the queen for the second time. And now rook has to capture the queen, and black would simply finish the game with rook g1 checkmate. That is the Arabian Mate. The rook gives check, and the knight controls the escape squares. This came from Steinitz from Vienna 1860. That is the pattern we are studying today. Hello everyone, I'm Aniket, an Arena International Master, and this is Chess Tactics episode 24. Today's pattern is Arabian Mate. Arabian Mate is a checkmate pattern where a rook gives mate, usually on the edge of the board, while a knight controls the key escape squares. Let's understand it better with a simple example. So here, if we analyze the position, the black king is already trapped because of the white's knight controlling both squares which are available to the king, and the rook is also controlling the g7. So if white plays a normal move like king g2, the game would be stalemate. So white has to be very careful, and here white can simply win the game with rook h7. The knight is protecting the rook, and the rook is attacking the king, and this knight is also controlling the key escape squares, which is g8. And that's a basic pattern. If you enjoy practical chess tactics, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's test the same idea in 5 more real game positions. Position 2, it's white to play. This is one of the cleanest Arabian Mate examples in the episode. Black's king is boxed in, but white still needs the correct forcing move. Find the move that starts the mating sequence. Pause the video here. This came from Emanuel Lasker and Maroczy versus Annan from 1900. And here, the move is queen takes g6, simply sacrificing the queen. But the real idea is white removes the defender and opens the way for the final rook invasion. And the point is, if rook takes on g6, that's simple checkmate with rook takes h7 thanks to the knight. So that is why after queen takes g6, the queen cannot be accepted. And ideally, he should continue the game with knight g5. Just give up a knight so that queen will also protecting on h7, and maybe he can hold. But unfortunately, black played knight takes e5. It looks similar, but it's not. And now white finished a game with a style, and he played rook takes h7 check, again sacrificing a rook. And now king cannot escape, so the only option black is having is to capture the rook back, and now queen g8 check. Third brilliant move in a row. And now rook has to capture the queen, and now rook takes g8 checkmate. Knight protecting the rook, and the rook is giving a checkmate. That is the Arabian Mate again. So the key idea is before the rook gives mate, you often need a forcing sacrifice to drag the king's defenders away. Now let's go to the next one. Position 3, it's white to play. Here, the tactic works because black's king has limited squares, but white must use the correct move order. This came from Aron Nimzowitsch from Riga 1913. And white has just made a blunder. He just moved the knight, attacks the queen, and he is expecting to play knight e2 in the next move, which will simply fork both of the rooks, and he might be winning. But unfortunately, he missed A very practical idea which Nimzowitsch did not miss. And here, Nimzowitsch sacrificed a queen and played queen takes h6. And now, king cannot take it because the knight is protecting the queen. So the only option black is having is g takes h6. And now, there's a knight f6. Coming with a check, king h8, the only option. And now, white finished the game with rook g8 checkmate. Knight protecting the rook delivering a checkmate, and also in this position, knight is controlling the escaping square which is h7. The important point is the move order. First, white removes the h-pawn, then the knight jumps with check, and finally the rook lands on g8 for checkmate. And that is why Arabian Mate works here. Now, let's go to the next one. Position 4, it's black to play. This is the most satisfying example in the episode because black's attack comes with sacrifice after sacrifice. This came from Adolf Anderssen versus Emil from Berlin 1864. Black starts with rook takes g5, black pulls the white king into danger, and now white continues the game with rook d7, black played rook g3 check, protected by the pawn, king h2, and now the fun starts. There's a knight takes f3, simply taking an advantage of this pin, and now the king is forced closer to the mating net. So the only option white is having is king h1, and now you got your dream position. The knight is controlling corner squares, and the king is already in the corner. So somehow you just need your rook on h2, and if you can do that, you are completely winning. And Emil continue the game with rook h3 check, sacrificing a rook. Another sacrifice. So white has to take it, and after it takes, there's a rook h2 delivers a checkmate. That's a beautiful Arabian mate. The rook gives check on h2 and the knight controls the key escape squares. The lesson is simple. Arabian mate is not always immediate. Sometimes you have to build the net first. Now, let's go to the next one. Position 5, it's black to play. This one is a harder because the first move does not give checkmate immediately. Black has to see the full mating pattern before starting the combination. Find the move that begins the forced checkmate. Pause the video here. This came from Boris Gelfand versus Vladimir Kramnik from Berlin 1996. And white has just made a blunder, so Kramnik continued the game with knight c3. This works because black is setting up a forced rook and knight mating net. And this knight can be captured with three different ways. And believe me, none of it is a good one. The point is, if bishop takes, then there's a d takes e3 and you are putting so much pressure on b2. If b takes e3, the game is already over with rook takes b1 thanks to the queen. And obviously, queen cannot capture the knight because he will simply lose a queen. So he tried knight takes d4, attacking the queen, attacking the rook, and asking, what's your plan? But now Kramnik showed why he was the world champion, and he played rook takes b2, sacrificing. What's the point? If knight takes a queen, it's a simple checkmate with either rook takes b1 or rook a2 checkmate. So in the game, he tried rook takes b2, but unfortunately, white simply lost the game here because of queen a2 check. The same idea which we have seen earlier. And now rook has to take it, and the game would simply end with rook b1 checkmate. Notice the difference from the earlier examples. Here, the Arabian mate pattern is hidden behind a longer forcing sequence. The practical lesson is simple. Do not only look for the final mate, look for forcing moves that drag the king into the mating pattern. Now, let's go to the final position. Final position, it's white to play. This is the hardest one because the Arabian mate does not happen immediately. White first has to force black's pieces into the wrong places. This came from Vassily Ivanchuk, one of my favorites, versus Levon Aronian from Linares 2006. And here, Ivanchuk played knight e6. A brilliant idea. If pawn takes the knight on e6, rook g7 check, king h8, rook takes h7 check, king g8, there's a rook d7, simple checkmate. So that is why this knight on e6 cannot be captured. So Levon continued the game with e takes f4, and now Ivanchuk played something which after Aronian resigned, and he played rook takes f7. And that's it. Levon resigned the game. What's the point? The point is, if rook takes on f7, now he was gonna play rook b8. Again, the similar idea. The only difference is the king is not on h8 but on g8. But the knight is still controlling the key escaping squares. So rook has to go back, and then there's a rook takes f8, which will simply lead to a checkmate. This is the final Arabian mate pattern. Final point is, even if the mate is not visible on move 1, the pattern can still decide the game. This is the lesson. When your rook can enter the back rank and your knight controls escape squares, always check for Arabian mate. So that's Arabian mate. Practical lesson is simple. A rook gives the final check, but the knight is usually the piece that makes the checkmate possible. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe for more practical chess tactics and comment which position was the hardest and tell me what move you found before I revealed it. I will see you in the next one.